Good day, dear students. Today's lecture's topic is error correction. One of the main dilemmas for teachers giving conversation groups is error correction. It's also always tricky to know when and if to correct students and how to go about it. The danger of overcorrecting is that students will lose motivation and you may even destroy the flow of the class or the activity by butting it and correcting every single mistake. The other extreme is to let the conversation flow, not to correct any mistakes. There are times when this is appropriate, but most students do want to have some of their mistakes corrected, as it gives them a basis for improvement. So the question is, when and how should you correct your students? Every teacher will have different views on this and different ways of correcting their students, and it's a case of finding out what both you and your students feel comfortable with. We learn by making mistakes. As children, we learn how to walk by falling over hundreds of times. As adults, we learn a new language by making uncountable mistakes in the use of words, grammar, sentence structure, pronunciation, and register. The most important thing for you as an English teacher is to correct your students' errors effectively and sensitively. Only then can you help them grow and develop their newly acquired language skills at their own pace and in comfortable and safe environment. Error correction is complex. The teacher has to make many decisions in a split second. What should I do about the error? Correct or not correct? When should it be corrected? Now? Later in the lesson? Next lesson? Who should correct it? Self-correction, peer correction, teacher correction? How should it be corrected? Which technique would work best? In English language teaching, there have traditionally been two categories, errors and slips. Errors happen when a learner doesn't have sufficient knowledge of the language. These could occur when they have never been exposed to the language and make an error because they have no prior knowledge to refer to. These are known as attempts, or errors could come from the language having been acquired incorrectly, and as far as they are concerned, they are correct. These are fossilized errors. Slips are the opposite end of the error spectrum. Slips happen when a learner knows the language, but due to the speed of conversation or other factors, they say or write something incorrect. These are often self-corrected or ignored. They even happen to native speakers when we mispronounce a word or mix up words in an idiom that we've used a million times. One interesting thing to note is that even at the highest bands of C2 level, Cambridge writing scales say that inaccuracies that occur as slips are perfectly acceptable. They are not something to be punished. Mistakes happen when a learner forgets the language that they have already acquired. It's not that they don't have the language, it's that they haven't accessed it correctly. Typical mistakes would come from language one influence and often involve the use of false cognates or word order. The over-application of language one rules in language two frequently causes mistakes. This could happen to native speakers too, especially children. The typical example is when they conjugate an irregular past verb incorrectly. For example, teached, because they have learned a new role and they start applying too much. Correcting errors. Errors are the most difficult to correct because not only you are providing correction, you are also providing the knowledge necessary to fill the student's gap in understanding. Errors should always be corrected. However, you need to be very careful about when and how to correct them. We've all been in the situation where we try to correct an error quickly, only to get pulled down a rabbit hole where before we know it, the board is covered in example sentences, phonemes, and explanation of the present perfect continuous. So, correction of errors has to be structured and formulated in a way that allows students to recognize how to form the correct language, but without breaking the flow of the class. What kind of errors do English as foreign language, English as a second language students make in class? Students make many mistakes during the long endeavor of learning a new language. This is a natural and necessary part of learning process. As a teacher, it helps you to identify the type of error in order to correct it effectively and smoothly. Productive skills errors. Errors in spoken or written skills include vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammatical errors, as well as errors in the producing intelligible language that can be understood globally. Receptive skills errors. Errors in listening and reading skills include misinterpretation of content, misunderstanding of words, or simply an inability to comprehend someone's speech in total. Who should correct an error? A teacher, student, or maybe self-correction? Teacher. Correction is immediate. Students hear the correct form. It's loud, clear, and noticed by all students. It saves the time. But it makes the teacher dominate the class. It doesn't stimulate thinking. It doesn't allow the teacher to understand if the mistake is a slip, an error, or a mistake. Other students. All learners are involved. Students have to listen to what others are saying. It stimulates thinking. It makes students cooperate. But incorrect forms may appear. A student being corrected may feel intimidated, less knowledgeable than others. It may result in conflicts between students. Self-correction. It's possible only when the student is able to correct him or herself. It's possible only when a student knows the rule but lacks practice in its use. Let's talk about correcting mistakes. Mistakes should be dealt with completely differently. Mistakes are not due to lack of knowledge. Therefore, if you delay correction, the student will look at the error and instantly know what the problem is. They will think something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, I knew that." So what have we achieved as a teacher at this point? We haven't helped to fill any gaps in knowledge. That's why mistakes should be corrected at the moment they are made. Even during a fluency activity, if you correctly identify the problem as a mistake, not an error, the correction should be quick and easy. Let's talk about correcting slips. Slips don't need to be corrected at all. Slips are like your mother always confusing you or your sibling's name. You know that she knows who you are. She just can't even seem to get it right. Correcting your mother may be satisfying for you as a corrector, but it's not going to help you understand better who you are, and it might just make her flustered. Mistakes. These occur when students produce the incorrect form even though they know the correct form. These often arise from stress and carelessness. Errors occur when the student does not know the correct form of or rule. As teacher, we should focus on errors, not mistakes. How can we identify if a student is making a mistake or an error? What kind of feedback, error correction can teachers give in both situations to be most effective? Now, I would like to suggest some classic error correction techniques. The first technique is metalinguistic explanation. For example, student. She has a long black hair. Teacher. Hair is an uncountable noun, so it doesn't take the indefinite article. This is explanation. The next technique, repetition. Student. In the morning, I get up at 7 o'clock, clean my tooth, have breakfast, and go to work. Teacher. You clean your tooth? Only one tooth? Not teeth, like this. It's repetition. Teacher, repeat the incorrect word. The next technique, direct explicit correction. Student, it's danger to smoke while you become pregnant. Teacher, while you become pregnant is very different. You mean while you're pregnant. Next technique, peer correction. During an in-class written activity where students complete a letter in pairs. Student 1, feel free to contact me if you are a problem. Student 2, I think it's have a problem. Next technique is delayed correction. Student, the cheerleader threw up high into the air. Teacher writes the sentence down in a notebook and puts it on the board after the activity. The whole group corrects the sentence. The next, recast. Student, when we won, I was so exciting. Teacher, you were excited. Paralinguistic explanation. Students, last night, while I was eating dinner, I started joking, so my friend hit me. Teacher, makes a facial expression of confusion, mimes laughing and choking. Elicitation. Student, waiter, could you bring me some tissues, please? Teacher, could you bring me some, maybe napkins, yeah? Please. Clarification request. Student, you can't sleep in my room because it's too crowded, but you can sleep with my sister. Teacher, excuse me? Teacher, clarify request. Tell them they're wrong. Teacher hands out a worksheet. Student, I hope this last sheet for today. Teacher, that's not how you pronounce that word. So not sheet, maybe sheet. Yes? Pronunciation error. Any and all of these correction techniques are acceptable and recommendable in the classroom. However, it's your role as a teacher to choose the best form of correction for the moment you correct. Studies have shown, for example, the recast, despite being the most common form of correction, are often overlooked. Students don't notice they are being corrected. Similarly, some students may like having their errors highlighted and displayed on the board after the activity, while for others this could cause substantial embarrassment, thus lowering their motivation and causing them to avoid complex language in the future interaction in order to avoid error in the future. What should you do to make corrections? Be sensitive to your students' needs and preferences. Ask your students at the beginning of your course which kind of error correction they prefer. Many students like being corrected immediately because they can still remember their mistake and learn from it, while others only want to focus on fluency. Be kind and patient in the way you correct. Always encourage your students to keep trying new language they've learned and assure them that making mistakes is okay. You want to encourage your students to speak and to experiment with what they've learned so far. Give your students a chance to self-correct or apply peer correction in your classroom. Some students learn better when they are corrected by their classmates instead of the teacher. Use visual cues. Sometimes simply raising your eyebrow can help your students realize that they have made the mistakes and give them a chance to correct themselves. Establish your own gestures for common mistakes in intense vocabulary and sentence structure, such as pointing, being, you, to indicate a student needs to use past tense.